Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And very exciting news about the Angola Diamond Exchange. We look forward to hearing more about that and how we can work together. Ladies and gentlemen, this year's conference is a content-driven agenda and focuses on the critical issues facing the industry. We're continuing from where we left off in 2019 when we talked about disruption. And then we have the mother of all disruptions that none of us saw coming. But this year's theme, we want to be optimistic and we want to look at the future of diamonds. And we've not met for a long time, so there's a lot to cover. And to help us guide through these discussions, as he did admirably last time, I'd like to welcome on stage Anish Aggarwal. Anish is the co-founder and partner of GEMDAX and will be the moderator for the next 3 sessions. Anish, over to you.
Thank you very much, Martin, for that kind introduction. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here, and I'd like to thank the DMCC for inviting me back. Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, good morning. I'm going to add my welcome to you all as well. Welcome to the Dubai Diamond Conference 2022. We're thrilled this has actually worked out and we can all meet in person and discuss some of the biggest issues facing our industry today. As you can probably guess from the conference theme, today we are really going to dig into what the future of the diamond industry holds in store for all of us. Martin mentioned the last conference, which took place in September 2019, which honestly feels like a lifetime ago. At that conference, disruption was our key theme, and we discussed it in a lot of detail. We talked about the defining issues that we thought would be disruptive at the time, issues like automated diamond manufacturing, issues like lab-grown diamonds. And we thought disruption would actually be the defining characteristic in the few years following the 2019 conference. We thought it would shake things up. And it turns out we were absolutely right that disruption would shape our future. We were just slightly wrong about the type of disruption that would do it. The disruption of COVID-19 has affected pretty much everybody in the world and is still affecting many of us. In 2020, large parts of the world essentially shut down. We saw lockdowns, we saw restrictions that went on for weeks, months, and beyond. People had to adapt to a new way of living. Businesses needed to adapt to a new way of doing business. When COVID first hit, many of us, and I admit I was one of them, were concerned at the way the pandemic would affect our diamond industry. Just to get a bit of interaction going, I'm going to ask everybody in the audience to raise your hand if you're worried about how the diamond industry would fare during the pandemic when COVID first hit. Can we have a show of hands? Who was not worried? Okay, thanks for that interaction. Many of us were worried because at that moment, diamonds hadn't performed well compared to other luxury products. Rough diamond prices, polished diamond demand, jewelry demand had all been stagnant, maybe even slightly falling for the last 5 or more years. There was this risk, this real risk, that consumers wouldn't buy diamonds, a product that doesn't have a functional value, at a time of economic and social crisis. If we'd had this conference 2 years ago, maybe instead of the theme being the future of the diamond industry, it could even have been, does the diamond industry even have a future? The good news is we know how this worked out now. It turns out that whilst the pandemic created unprecedented disruption for the world, it created unprecedented opportunity for our industry. It turns out that diamonds have real staying power. They may be a discretionary product, but they've got enduring value. Since the beginning of 2020, rough diamond prices have gone up by at least 30%. Polished prices have held the line. They've gone up in line with that. We've seen surging diamond jewelry demand in all the major consumer markets. It's been incredible. We haven't seen growth like this for a really long time. The question we need to be asking ourselves now is this: where are we going to be in 2 to 3 years from now? The last couple of years were really unpredictable, and we ended up on the right side of that. Things worked in our favor. What if the next 2 years are just as unpredictable and we're on the wrong side of the way things play out? What did we do as an industry to gain such a strong position in the last 2 years? Or did we just benefit from circumstances? What's around the corner, especially as all the disruption we talked about in 2019 is still with us, and these are very important factors that play into our future. We're going to try to answer all of these questions at today's conference. We're going to start by asking the most direct question: why did we do so well during the pandemic? What were the factors that allowed us to do well, and what are the opportunities that's going to create for us as we look ahead? We also need to look at the risks and the threats we could face. That's going to be the focus of the first session, to really look at the market environment. In the second session, we're going to turn our attention to the consumer. The biggest debate at our last conference was around lab-grown diamonds. There's the multi-billion-dollar question about how could lab-grown diamonds affect demand and growth of the natural diamond industry. What's important here is that we need to look at how these two different products interact with today's changing consumer reality. There's no doubt that COVID has changed the way the consumer thinks. It's accelerated certain consumer trends. We've seen an explosion of online sales. We've seen digitization being fast-tracked. And a lot of it is stuck. People who bought online during the pandemic aren't going back to the stores in the same way. Some of us used to think that diamond jewelry had to be sold in a store. It had to be sold in a physical environment. We now know that definitely isn't true. So there's digitization. But we're also seeing an increased amount of social consciousness from consumers. Issues like sustainability, issues like climate change. And all this is being led by a new generation, Gen Z, or Gen Z if you're American. And they're shaping the way the rest of us think. How will a more socially conscious consumer make purchasing decisions? How is that going to affect demand for diamond jewelry? So the second session is really going to be around the consumer. In the third part of this conference, we're going to focus on the midstream, which is the bridge between the miner and the retailer. It's the heart of our business, and it's where many of you sitting in the audience do your work. We're going to look at the issues that affect the way you do business, and we're going to start with the technology disruption we talked about at our last conference. We're going to get an update from it. How will manufacturing technology evolve? What's happened practically so far? What's going to happen? Is labor-driven manufacturing going to become a thing of the past? We also need to ask a broader supply chain question. What is the best supply chain for our industry to have? And after that, in the very last session of our conference, we're going to talk to the trade bodies who represent many of you here, get their views on how the diamond industry is going to evolve, and we're going to get their views as to what they think's in store for us and their reactions to what's been said so far. As the chairman of the DMCC, Hamid bin Sulayman, said just now, this conference is different from others because of its emphasis on dialogue. Because it's only through discussion and debate and challenging industry leaders can you get a better sense of what's going on and gain the insights you need for your own businesses. And that conversation doesn't have to stop today. It doesn't have to stop at today's conference. It can continue in your own offices. This is really important to do at a time when there is a high amount of unpredictability, which is exactly what we're facing now. So let's dive into the first session. What happened in the last 2 years and what's in store in the next 2. I think just as a short introduction here, it's easy to forget where we're sitting now, that 2019 was a really difficult year. Before the pandemic, things had been difficult for a while. And when the pandemic hit, things got a lot worse. We saw a collapse in the rough diamond market. We saw a dramatic fall in rough trading volumes. Major miners like Alrosa, De Beers, and others stopped selling rough. I guess they didn't want to sell into a market that didn't exist. But in the end, rough diamond supply fell more than polished demand. And this created a sense of shortage. It created a market recovery. Polished demand was strong because consumers kept buying diamond jewelry. With lockdowns and other restrictions, they couldn't sell, they couldn't spend money on experiences, they couldn't go to restaurants, they couldn't go on a plane and to a hotel. And a lot of this spend got diverted into personal goods, and the diamond jewelry industry benefited greatly. All this spend was propped up and supported by all the government relief packages that we saw at that time. The trouble with a lot of these factors is they seem temporary and out of our control. What happens when the COVID situation unwinds? What happens when you can spend money on eating out and going to restaurants and going on holiday, jumping on planes, like many of you here have done? What happens when government relief packages start to cool off like they're doing now? What happens when we have a more difficult economic environment and higher inflation? Could we end up in a 2019 situation with lower prices and lower demand? On the other hand, we've had a once-in-a-generation bull market in diamonds. It's been amazing. Have we created enough momentum to see us through the next couple of years? Have we created new opportunities? Has the consumer fallen in love with diamonds again? Here to answer all of these questions is an individual who showed a great deal of leadership as a person and through the organization he leads. It's my pleasure to introduce on stage Bruce Cleaver, CEO of De Beers.